I never thought revenge would taste this bitter and strangely addictive. It hit me first as a laugh I couldn't control, sharp and ridiculous. Right in the middle of a crowded cafe where everyone was pretending not to watch. That was me laughing like an idiot while staring at him, the one person I was supposed to hate, the brother of my ex, Lucian Hayes. Lucian. Even saying the name made my chest tighten. A subtle burn that had nothing to do with anger. He leaned against the counter, fingers idly tracing the rim of his coffee cup, eyes calculating every movement I made, every twitch of my expression. God, he always looked like he knew everything, like the world was just a chessboard and he had already won. And yet, beneath that calculating mask, there was something dangerously magnetic that I had no business noticing. I had planned this encounter like a surgeon, every detail sharp and precise. Revenge was my weapon. My ex, Damien, had ruined me, and I swore I would hit back. Lucian, with his effortless charm and razor-sharp mind, was the perfect tool. He didn't just know Damien's weaknesses. He thrived on them, and I was about to become his puppet, even if I didn't know it yet. "You look tense," Lucian said, voice smooth, teasing, like he enjoyed every second of seeing me unravel. "Maybe I am," I snapped, surprised by how quickly irritation rose at his calm. "Maybe I'm just not used to talking to people who are this smug." He smirked, a slow, knowing curl of the lips that made my stomach flip. Smug? Or maybe I just see things you don't. I wanted to roll my eyes, wanted to tell him he was ridiculous, but something in the way he looked at me, so directly, so unapologetically, froze my tongue. It wasn't just the arrogance. It was the intensity, the subtle pull that made it impossible to step away. And that was the trap. I should have walked out. I should have ignored the pull and stuck to my plan. But I didn't. The rooftop of the Hayes family apartment was empty except for us. And the city sprawled beneath, lights flickering like a reflection of the chaos between us. Lucian's hand brushed mine as he leaned casually on the railing. Just a brush, but enough to make a shiver run up my arm. My plan was clear. Get close, gather information, humiliate Damien, and leave. But standing there, feeling the heat from his body and the tension in the air, I realized revenge had become a complicated thing, especially when the enemy was undeniably attractive. "I never understood you," I admitted finally, voice low, almost a whisper. "Understand me?" he echoed, stepping closer. "I doubt anyone ever does. Maybe that's why it's fun watching you try." I should have laughed, but I didn't. My heart was pounding, caught between fear, irritation, and something else, something dangerous. Desire. It started small, innocent enough coffee meetings that turned into late-night walks, discussions about Damien's inevitable downfall that felt like play-acting more than strategy. Lucian had a way of making every word, every glance, feel like a challenge I had to rise to. And somehow, each challenge made the thrill of his presence addictive. "Do you know what I enjoy most?" he asked one night, his voice low and intimate, like we were alone even in a crowded bar. "Watching people underestimate me. Watching them think they're in control when they're really dancing to my tune." I tried to mask my heartbeat, tried to remind myself that this was war, that Lucian was just a means to an end. But war had never felt so intimate. He leaned closer, just enough for our shoulders to brush, and I caught the scent of his cologne, something earthy, something dangerous. "You're dangerously close to being predictable," he murmured, eyes glinting in the dim light. "Maybe I am," I admitted, before I could stop myself, feeling the sting of honesty like fire. "Or maybe I'm learning from the best." Lucian didn't reply immediately. He just looked at me, long and deliberate, like he was weighing something far heavier than I could see. And in that silence, I realized how tightly I was already caught in his orbit, how impossible it would be to separate myself without damage. The days blurred into nights, schemes turning into moments of stolen intimacy, laughter shared over minor victories, hands brushing in hallways, lingering touches that neither of us could fully acknowledge. Every encounter was charged, every word a potential trap. I was supposed to be in control, orchestrating Damien's fall, but Lucian had rewritten the rules of the game without even trying. One evening, standing on the edge of a rooftop garden overlooking the city. He leaned in closer than ever. The wind tugged at his hair, making him look almost ethereal, and I wanted to hate him for it but couldn't. "Do you ever wonder?" he asked, voice barely above the wind. "If maybe revenge isn't what we really want?" I swallowed, feeling the raw truth in his words. Maybe revenge had never been about Damien. Maybe it had always been about the thrill of danger, about the closeness that scared me more than any scheme. "I don't know," I admitted, voice shaking despite myself. "Maybe I'm too caught up to see clearly." Caught up? His hand found mine, fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had always belonged there. "I think you're exactly where you need to be." I wanted to pull away, to remind myself that this was dangerous, that Lucien was supposed to be my ally in revenge, not the source of my distraction. But standing there, with the city sprawling beneath us and his eyes holding mine, I realized the truth. I was falling, and falling wasn't a choice, it was inevitable. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope strung between exhilaration and danger. Lucien had a way of making ordinary moments feel like the edge of a precipice, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to step back or leap headfirst. He texted me at all hours, each message calculated yet impossibly intimate. One morning, it was a photo of our coffees on the counter, the corner of his notebook visible with schematics about Damien's business missteps. Another time, a single word, waiting. I hated him for how easily he infiltrated my thoughts. I hated him for making revenge feel irrelevant. But mostly, I hated myself for smiling like an idiot whenever his name appeared on my phone. It wasn't long before our plans to undermine Damien escalated. Lucien had contacts, leverage, and a subtle ruthlessness that made me both fear and admire him. Each strategy session became a mix of calculation and seduction. He'd lean over the blueprints sprawled on my dining table, his breath brushing my ear as he whispered ideas that would ruin Damien, and I would catch myself imagining him there for reasons far more personal than revenge. One night, after a particularly tense encounter with Damien's team, Lucien invited me to his apartment. I hesitated. It was supposed to be about strategy, not temptation. But I found myself agreeing almost automatically. The apartment was immaculate, minimalistic but warm, lit by amber lamps that threw long shadows on the walls. Lucien poured 2 glasses of red wine and gestured for me to sit. "You look exhausted," he observed, voice smooth as silk. "Do you always give everything to a plan?" "I have to," I replied, swiping a hand across my forehead. "Otherwise, I'd just be nothing." He smiled knowingly, eyes holding mine. "Nothing is more dangerous than nothing. But you have fire." I felt a flush creeping up my neck. "Fire," he said. Fire that matched the warmth creeping through my chest every time he looked at me like that. "Lucien," I started, then stopped. Words failed me, as they always did when he was near. The air between us was too charged, too intimate. His hand brushed mine again, this time lingering just a fraction longer. "You're thinking about crossing lines," he murmured, reading me like an open book. "Don't. Not yet. Not until you're ready to burn completely." I shivered, a mixture of desire and fear making my knees weak. And then, as if on cue, he leaned in, just a breath away from my lips, the scent of his cologne enveloping me, the warmth of his presence nearly unbearable. "I could make you forget revenge entirely," he whispered. "Don't," I whispered back, though my voice trembled. "Don't make me want something I can't have." He laughed softly, the sound like velvet against my nerves. "I think you already do." From that moment, the line between revenge and desire blurred irrevocably. Lucien's presence became intoxicating. Every glance, every brush of his hand, every word carefully calculated to unsettle me. I tried to remind myself of Damien, of the betrayal, of why I started this game in the first place. But Lucien had a way of erasing all of that with just a look. Our nights became a dangerous dance. Rooftop meetings under the city lights, coffee at midnight, whispered conversations in empty corridors. Each encounter was fraught with tension, a mixture of strategy and seduction that left me dizzy. He always knew how close to push me, how far to pull back. And I hated and loved how much control he had over me. One evening, the tension reached a breaking point. We were in Lucien's car, parked overlooking the downtown skyline. The city lights reflected off the glass, bathing us in a kaleidoscope of colors. He reached across the console, fingers brushing my hand. "Do you know what scares me?" he asked, voice low, almost vulnerable. I frowned. "You? The all-knowing, untouchable Lucien Hayes." "Even I have fears," he said, eyes fixed on mine. "I fear losing control, losing myself, losing this." His hand tightened around mine. I felt a jolt of electricity, a mixture of fear and longing. "This?" He nodded slowly. "Us. You. Everything I shouldn't want but can't resist." I wanted to pull away, to remind myself of reason, of revenge, of the plan. But the truth was undeniable. I wanted him too. More than I had wanted anyone in years. And in that instant, it became painfully clear that the game we were playing was no longer about Damien. It was about us. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Lucien and I moved closer, our interactions loaded with unspoken tension. Every brush of skin, every lingering gaze, every shared smile carried a dangerous intimacy. Yet, even as we grew closer, the specter of revenge loomed. Damien's presence was a constant reminder of why we started this. And the risk of being discovered added an edge to our encounters that was almost thrilling. One night, as rain poured against the windows of Lucien's apartment, we found ourselves huddled on the couch, wine forgotten on the coffee table. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within me. I turned to him, eyes searching his face for answers I wasn't sure I wanted. "You're dangerous," I said quietly. He smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from my forehead. "I know. And so are you." Our lips met then, tentative at first, testing boundaries, tasting a desire that had been simmering for weeks. The kiss deepened, hungry and desperate, a collision of fear and longing. I felt my world tilt, reality bending around the intensity of the moment. Lucien's hands moved over me with careful precision, and I realized that every strategy, every plan, every thought of revenge had been replaced by Thisbe him. We broke apart, gasping for air, faces inches apart, foreheads touching. "You're impossible," I whispered, voice raw. "And yet, here you are," he murmured, eyes dark and intense, filled with a mixture of triumph and tenderness. In the weeks that followed, our bond deepened. We became inseparable, moving in a rhythm that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Lucien's charisma and cunning were matched by a surprising gentleness, a care for me that I hadn't expected. I, in turn, found myself revealing parts of myself I had long kept hidden, trusting him in ways that were both frightening and liberating. But the past has a way of creeping in, uninvited. Damien, oblivious to the growing tension between his brother and me, continued to maneuver, making mistakes that Lucien and I exploited. The thrill of the plan remained, but now it was intertwined with something far more profound, a connection that neither of us could deny. One night, after successfully cornering Damien in a business deal, we stood on the rooftop where it had all begun. The city sprawled beneath us, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Lucien took my hand, intertwining our fingers naturally, a silent promise of something more. "You know," he said softly, "I think I could get used to this, to us." I smiled, heart swelling. "Me too. Even if it started with revenge, I wouldn't trade this. Any of this, for anything." He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "Good, because I don't plan on letting you go." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed him. The danger, the tension, the thrill of revenge, it all faded into the background. What remained was something far stronger. Trust, desire, and a connection that neither of us had anticipated but both of us desperately needed. We had navigated the treacherous waters of deception and temptation, and somehow we had found each other. In the quiet moments that followed, as the city hummed beneath us, I realized that Lucien was no longer just a means to an end. He was the heart of a story I hadn't expected to live, a story of passion, risk, and ultimately, love. And standing there with him, hand in hand, I understood that sometimes the most dangerous games lead to the most unexpected rewards. We stayed on that rooftop until the early hours, talking, laughing, and sometimes just breathing in each other's presence. The world felt vast, infinite, and ours. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need for revenge, because the only thing that mattered was the dangerous, intoxicating, utterly beautiful connection between Lucien and me. Even Damien, in his obliviousness, couldn't ruin what had grown between us. Lucien and I had crossed lines, taken risks, and flirted with danger. But in the end, we had found something genuine, something worth protecting. And in the quiet dawn, as the first light of morning kissed the city skyline, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Because falling into Lucien's web hadn't destroyed me. It had saved me, and I was finally ready to let go of the past, embrace the present, and step into a future where danger, desire, and love coexisted in a delicate, thrilling balance. The days after our rooftop confession felt surreal, like living in a dream where danger and desire merged seamlessly. Lucien and I had established a rhythm that was both comforting and thrilling. We navigated the remnants of our revenge plans against Damien with precision, but neither of us was eager to rush back into the old schemes. The thrill of strategy had been replaced by something far more potent, the slow burn of intimacy. One evening, Lucien surprised me by taking me to a small art gallery tucked away in downtown New York. The walls were lined with abstract paintings and photographs, each piece inviting reflection. He wandered beside me, his hand brushing mine occasionally, testing my attention, drawing me in. I realized then that our connection wasn't just physical, it was a shared understanding, a bond that thrived in silence as much as in conversation. "You always seem to find the unexpected," I said, glancing at him as he studied a painting of a stormy sea. "Life is full of the unexpected," he replied, eyes softening as he looked at me. "But some things, some people, are worth holding on to, no matter how unpredictable they are." I felt my chest tighten, the words striking a chord I hadn't anticipated. "Are you talking about me?" He smirked, that dangerous, magnetic smirk that had ensnared me from the start. "Maybe I am." We laughed softly, a shared sound that felt intimate and free, unburdened by schemes or past hurts. I realized how rare this sense of peace was for me, how rare it was to feel safe in someone's presence while also feeling electrified by their nearness. Lucien had become both a sanctuary and a storm, a paradox I no longer wished to solve. As weeks passed, our bond deepened. Late-night talks turned into lazy mornings, strategic meetings often ended in shared dinners, and casual touches gradually became gestures of reassurance and affection. Lucien was learning to temper his sharp, calculating side, revealing glimpses of vulnerability that made my heart ache. And I, in turn, was letting myself trust, to surrender to the warmth of his presence without fear. One afternoon, while walking through Central Park, the sunlight filtering through the autumn leaves, he stopped and turned to me. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked, eyes glinting with mischief and memory. I chuckled, a little embarrassed. "How could I forget? You looked infuriatingly confident, and I wanted to throttle you. And yet here we are," he said, brushing a stray hair from my forehead. "I think we've come a long way from that rooftop." I smiled, feeling the weight of everything we'd endured, the anger, the revenge, the tension, and how it had transformed into something entirely unexpected. "Yeah," I admitted softly, "we really have." Lucien leaned closer, and I felt the familiar pull of his presence, a magnetic force I could no longer resist. This time, our kiss was slow, deliberate, a gentle promise rather than a desperate collision. It spoke of trust, of connection, of a love that had grown from chaos into something steady and enduring. "I don't want this to be complicated anymore," I murmured, resting my forehead against his. He smiled, eyes tender and sincere. "It doesn't have to be. We've already survived everything life threw at us. Now it's time to just be." And so we did. We began to build a life in the quiet moments between city lights and daily routines. Breakfasts in small cafes, shared walks through the park, laughter echoing in our apartment, each ordinary moment infused with a sense of wonder because it was ours. Lucien surprised me again one chilly evening with a picnic on our rooftop. The skyline glittered as if celebrating with us. He had laid a blanket, brought food, and even strung fairy lights around the railings. I felt my heart swell at the effort, at the thoughtfulness behind every detail. I wanted to create something simple, he said, eyes bright. Something that's just for us. No schemes, no plans, just us. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his jacket, the steady beat of his heart. It's perfect, I whispered. He kissed my temple softly, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and relief. We had navigated deception, temptation, and the dangerous web of our emotions, and now, finally, there was clarity. We were together not because of revenge, not because of schemes, but because we had chosen each other in a world that often felt unpredictable. As months passed, our relationship flourished. We supported each other's ambitions, celebrated small victories, and weathered minor disagreements with patience and humor. Lucien's charisma softened into a dependable warmth, and I found myself reciprocating with care and attention I hadn't realized I could offer. Our love was a careful balance of passion and tenderness, and it grew stronger with each shared sunrise and whispered confession. One winter evening, snow falling gently outside our window, Lucien held my hand and said, "I think we've finally reached a point where I don't want anything else except to spend every day with you." I felt tears prick my eyes, a mixture of joy and disbelief. "I feel the same," I admitted, voice breaking slightly. "I never thought I could be this happy." He smiled, that smile that had captivated me from the start, and pulled me close. "Then don't think. Just be." And I did. I let go of the past, the betrayal, the anger, the schemes, and embraced the love that had grown from it. Lucien and I had danced on the edge of danger, survived the thrill of revenge, and emerged on the other side with something enduring, something real. Our love became our sanctuary. We found joy in simple gestures, in quiet moments, in knowing glances across crowded rooms. The city continued to hum around us, vibrant and chaotic, but we had carved out our own corner of peace. One spring morning, standing together on our rooftop once more, I looked out at the skyline and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Lucien squeezed my hand gently, and I knew without words that he felt the same. "I never thought I could trust someone again," I confessed quietly. "But with you, it's easy." He kissed me softly, forehead to forehead, eyes filled with warmth. "You'll never have to doubt it again." And for the first time in years, I believed him, because we had survived storms, temptations, and the dangerous games of the past, and now we had each other. Not as pawns in a revenge plot, not as players in someone else's drama, but as partners, lovers, and best friends. Lucien laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You know, I think we make a pretty good team." I smiled, heart full. "The best team." We stood there, hand in hand, watching the sunrise over the city, a new day stretching before us. It was a day without schemes, without danger, without fear, just us, together, safe in the love we had fought to claim. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected paths, the dangerous, thrilling, complicated paths, lead to the most beautiful destinations. Lucien and I had found ours. Forever wasn't a concept I believed in lightly, but standing there with him, watching the world awaken, I felt it in my bones. Our story, born of revenge, tempered by desire, and solidified in trust, was just beginning. And I wouldn't trade a single moment of it. Because falling into Lucien's web had been the greatest risk of my life and also the greatest reward. We stayed on that rooftop until the sun was fully risen, wrapped in each other's arms, and I knew with a certainty I had never felt before that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Love, dangerous and thrilling, had found us, and this time it was ours to keep. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, Please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.